Hey there, I'm Jane Sawyer, and this is Jane Sawyer Sculpts a Baby Dragon Hatching Out of an Egg. A few weeks ago, I made some dragon's eggs out of some plastic Easter eggs I got from the dollar store. While I was working on that project, I was out and about running errands, and I happened upon this giant plastic egg, and I thought it would be pretty cool to sculpt a baby dragon hatching out of this egg. So when I posted the video of my 4 dragon's eggs inspired by the 4 elements of nature, earth, air, fire, and water, I asked all of you which dragon I should sculpt hatching out of my big egg, and the majority of you said fire. So here's our little fire egg. She's the inspiration for our big guy. Let's see how this turns out. So just like my smaller plastic eggs, I covered this whole thing in a layer of paper mache. Now I want to divide my egg into segments, which I did with a rubber band on the smaller eggs, but I don't think I have a rubber band that will stretch around this big boy, so we're going to use another trick here. I'm hammering this push pin into the center top of the plastic, tying a bit of twine around the pin, and using it to mark some vertical sections. Next, I'm using a Sharpie to rough in the area that I'm going to cut out later. I don't want to waste time building up texture on this part because it's just not going to be there later. Now I've got this lid of a pressed cardboard egg carton. Just like last time, I'm going to use this to make some lava texture on the surface of our egg. After I have got one layer laid down, I'm going back and building up some smaller areas with second and third layers of egg carton. Off camera, I covered the whole egg in these little segments except for that area I mapped out earlier, which I cut out of the egg. This is where our little baby dragon will be breaking out. I'm starting the dragon's head with a balloon. I've blown it up to about 10 centimeters long and covered it with a few layers of paper mache. We're going to build the rest of the dragon's head onto this paper mache balloon with some cardboard cereal box. So I've cut out these corn kernel shaped bits of cardboard. I cut a little wedge into each of these. This will act as a dart, kind of like in sewing. And when I tape the 2 legs of the dart together, it gives the flat cardboard some 3D shape. I'm taping these 2 pieces to the side of the balloon. These are going to be the sides of the dragon's head. Now I want to fill in this area here, so off camera I'm using trial and error to cut out this shape. This is going to be the underside of the dragon's snout. I'm using masking tape to stick it on here. Let me know in the comments if you want me to throw these template pieces up onto my website. I can do that for free if anybody's interested. So with the top of the snout, I want the sides to come in a bit more narrow, so I'm making the cardboard a bit more narrow than the gap there, and I can bend the cheeks in while I tape it together. Now I just have these little comma shapes I need to fill in, so I cut these out of cardboard and tape them in place. And easy as that, there's the base of our dragon's head. I'm not going to sculpt the entire dragon's body, obviously you'll never see it, but I do need to have a bit of neck to support the head, so I'm going to use a chunk of this broken pool noodle. I'm carving it down with my craft knife. Again, you're not going to see this too much, so I'm not being too fussy, but I also don't want it to look like a perfect cylinder, so I'll bulk up the front with some packing paper and tape that down with masking tape. My glue gun is breaking, but once I finally get some hot glue out, I'm sticking the 2 dragon parts together and test fitting them back onto my egg. I thought it might be cool to have part of the tail wrapping around the inside top of the egg, so I cut that out of the pool noodle and glued that in place too. Before we move on, I want to use some aluminum foil to build a bit more detail onto the dragon's head. I'm sticking on some long tadpole shapes for the brow bones. Next, I'm using a little worm of foil to make the bottom lip. I'm also using the foil to make some ears. Now that's all for the structural work, so I'm locking all that in place with a layer of paper mache. While that paper mache was drying, I also made a bunch of tiny horns and spikes with some air dry clay. I like these to be already dry for the next step, so I make them ahead. We're fitting our dragon into her egg again, and I've got to bend the little ear to fit it in. I think his ears would probably be bent up when they're squished inside the egg, so I really like this little detail. I've got a pair of glass eyes here. There's a link to these ones in the description if you want to get the same ones, but there's lots of ways to make your own eyes too. I'm hot gluing these in place. Now we're going to use some paper clay to cover the dragon so we can sculpt lots of cool textures and details. I like both Creative Paper Clay and DOS brand. Links to both are in the description. I rolled out a sheet of clay and I'm just using some regular old white glue to stick it on the papier-mâché pool noodle. The back of a spoon makes a great smoothing tool. Now this is why I like to pre-make my little spikes, because I can use a drop of glue and just shove them into the wet clay, and it really looks like they're growing out of the skin. When the clay has started to dry but still slightly moist, I'll use this little vinyl tool to sketch in a scaly texture. Now we're going to cover the baby dragon's head in clay. I really love breaking sculptures down into two phases like this, a structural building phase and a detailing phase. I like building structures in materials that are more structural, and then sculpting textures in materials that are more squishy. So since I've got all the structural problems solved and everything is hard and dry, I can really go in and enjoy all the detail work. This clay is paper-based, and I get it to stick to the papier-mâché with regular old white glue. We're essentially gluing paper fiber to paper fiber, so this glue works really great. You've seen me make the eyelids and the lips with snakes of clay. The nostrils are also little snakes with a taper at each end. I set them in place and blend one side into the sculpture. I'm covering the dragon's chin with a sheet of clay, then poking in some of those pre-made horns from earlier. Again, as the clay starts to get a bit firm, I'm sketching in some scales with this vinyl tool. I've linked the tool set I use in my Amazon storefront if you're interested. You can see in this shot here that the edges of the clay are starting to dry out. You'll notice the edges are a bit brighter white than the rest of the clay. So I'm working in small patches so I can get those scales sketched in before the clay gets too hard. Next, I sculpted some larger horns. I wanted these to firm up a bit before I placed them, so I took care of that now, and I'm setting them aside to dry. I wanted his cheeks to be a bit puffier than I could do with the cardboard, so we're going to build up those areas. I'm smoothing a snake of clay into the jawline. I always do the same thing to both sides at the same time. This really helps me keep my sculptures symmetrical. I'm blending in those snakes, then adding a crescent shape under each eye. I'm blending this in with my sculpting spoon. This is not included in that toolkit I mentioned, but a spoon's a great addition. I got mine at the dollar store. After building up his snout to where I liked, I did another crescent shape over each eye and pushed in some horns and spikes. I'm covering the top of the head with some more clay, installing those little horns you saw me make, and working a snake of clay around each horn to make it look like the horns were growing out naturally. I'm installing a few more little spikes and then sketching in some scales, but I'm leaving the middle section of the top of his head blank. I've got another plan for that area, and you'll see that in a second. Finally, I'm building up the meat and the lobe of the ear and smoothing that into the papier-mâché. So this is where I am. I think it would be so cute if we just had like a little paw poking out here. So I'm making some little fingers with rolls of aluminum foil, covering those in clay and letting them dry in place on the side of the eggshell while all the clay on the head dries. Now I'm bringing in my egg cartons again. I want to bring the texture on the outside of our egg onto our baby dragon. So I've cut out a bunch of scales in a few different sizes. I'm gluing them onto selected areas of the face and the head. I've also covered the back of the head with some large scales. Here it is all dried. So let's just check in here. This is the egg with the tail. Here's the little claws. They'll stick in just here. And of course, the head and the chest. Well, let's move on to painting. Firstly, all three pieces get a couple coats of gesso. I'll base coat the inside of the egg in black, the outside of the egg in this bright yellow, and the tail in this nice rich red. Focusing on our eggshell here, I'm dry brushing all the little egg carton islands with orange, working all the way to the edge of each island. When that's dry, I'm dry brushing some red onto each island, but I'm letting some of the orange show through around the edges. This is how that looks when it's dry. Then I'm dry brushing some black into the center of each island, leaving some red and orange showing. When the black is good and dry, I'll use a tiny brush to paint a blurry yellowish white line around each of those egg carton islands. And that's the final paint job on the eggshell. Look at that glow. All right, let's paint the dragon. Our fiery friend is starting with an all-over coat of red. Now, this is gonna hurt some of you, but I'm giving her an all-over black wash. So I've mixed some black and red paint and watered it down. I'm quickly slapping it on, then wiping it back with a damp paper towel. You can experiment with how long you let the paint sit and how aggressively you wipe it off until you get the look you like. Finally, I'm using some orange paint and a small brush to go in and highlight scales and texture. This really adds so much depth. I'm covering the dragon with a bit of this dragonfly glaze. It makes our fresh hatchling look a little bit wet and a little bit magical. And then we'll just glue our 3 pieces together. And there you have it, a baby dragon hatching out of a repurposed Easter egg. I hope this inspires you to give a sculpting project a try. You can make really detailed sculptures by combining paper clay with papier-mâché. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I respond to almost every comment I get here on my channel, and I'm always happy to help out my viewers whenever I can. Leave me a like if you think I did a good job. Likes make me feel all warm and fuzzy, and they also allow more people to find this video. Subscribe to my channel if you're interested in more affordable and accessible art info. I post here as often as I can. You can find more info and free templates for other fantasy-inspired projects over at janesawyermakes.com. Check it out, follow me on the socials, go make something magical, and I'll see you on the next one.